Hey, this is Final Draft. You're listening to Everfree Radio, and I'm here with...
One Trick.
And today we have an awesome guest, a real treat for you guys. One Miss Sabrina Alberghetti. Welcome.
Hello. Nice to be here.
Now, you're known among the fans and among the veterans of Equestria Daily as Sibsy, is that correct?
You betcha.
How did you get to that name?
Oh, it's kind of a funny story. It goes back to when I was, I don't know, around 14 or 15, and used to watch a lot of Animaniacs as a kid. And my best friend, who lived one house down from me, we were like sisters. And in the show Animaniacs, Yakko would always refer to his brother and sister as his siblings, and he would call them Sibs for short. And because I was so close with my best friend and her family, they kind of adopted that name for me. Again, it started off as Sibs, and then it just kind of turned into Sibsy, and her dad would call me that. I was kind of like, you know, their second daughter or whatever, because we were super tight. And that's really it. It's kind of a silly nickname, but it stuck for, 15 years or so.
Well, and so when did you get started in animation? How did you get started in doing what you do, which is storyboarding?
Probably like most artists, you start when you're a kid. Everyone says, oh, I've been drawing since I could pick up a pencil. It's kind of cliche, but it's kind of the way it goes. I figured this is what I'm good at. This is what I should be doing. So I applied to a college in Ontario. I'm originally from a town near Toronto. So I applied to this animation school, Sheridan College, and I was accepted into this program. And it was a 3-year course, and you learned all the fundamentals of animation. It was draw all the time. And I really got into the story aspect of animation. I wanted to learn how to tell stories. I wanted to learn just dealing with like mood and shots and using the camera and having a way to convey emotion in a story really piqued my interest more than anything else. After that, I graduated and I moved out here, out west to Vancouver.
Well, and I actually had a question about the overall animation process, which is you're a storyboarder. Where does that fit in the process from, say, the conception of an episode to when it's put on TV?
Well, the storyboard artist essentially is the second person in the lineup, from start to finish. We get a script from the writers, and we basically have to conceptualize everything visually that's written down on the paper in the best way that we possibly can to tell the story effectively, to convey, like I was saying, to convey the emotions and to make everything clear as to what's going on. So basically the storyboard is just like a comic form of the script we're given. And once we storyboard out the entire script, it then goes to layout. Of course, after directors look at it, it goes to layout and animation, and then it becomes what it is, a final product.
Going back to your start in art and all this, when you graduated from college, how did you make the leap from being the academic artist to the professional artist?
Luck, kind of. Everything kind of fell into place for me. I was, right place, right time. I graduated, and I had a friend who was living out west who let me know that there was a studio that was looking for storyboard artists and that I should do a test, as most jobs require you to do a test to get into a studio, show them what you got. So I did this test while I was pretty much packing up my whole life and ready to move. I did the test, I sent it back, and they liked what they saw, and I moved here. And a week later, I started work, and I was kind of just thrown into it. I didn't really know what to expect. It almost felt like everything I learned at school, I had to throw out the window. Like most things, you learn while you're doing it. And it was kind of a boot camp for me. It was pretty harsh, but it was very educating at the same time. I learned a lot at the first studio I worked at, and I wouldn't give up that for the world.
Okay, before My Little Pony, what else were you working on? I know that you have a history of doing comics such as Darkwing Duck. What else have you done?
Well, animation-wise, the first studio I was just speaking of, I worked on the show Ed, Edd n Eddy, which I had never seen before I had worked on it because it never aired in Canada, even though it was produced in Canada. It was kind of strange. So I did that for almost 5 years. After that, when my contract was up, I applied to Studio B, which is up the street from the AKA studio.
It's very convenient.
Yeah, it was very convenient. I started working on some Kid vs. Cat. I think I was just doing storyboard revisions at the time just to kind of get my foot in the door, because it was a new studio. Even though I've been doing storyboards for 5 years, when you move to a new studio, you kind of have to pay the dues and you have to kind of work up again. And after that, I started doing some board work for Kid vs. Cat. And then after that, I hopped on to Martha Speaks, which was a fun little show to work on. And I did some board supervision on that show for a year. And after that, we got the call for, My Little Pony. And they asked, do you want to do My Little Pony? And I said, well, I'm not so sure. Because, when you think of My Little Pony, you refer back to the older ones, which when I was a kid, it was great. But after seeing Lauren's drawings and the direction it was heading, there was no way I could say no to it. I was so excited.
You've done a lot of these comics as well. What other comics have you done?
I had a good opportunity to do a bunch of Disney stuff for a while. I was doing mainly covers because I didn't have enough time to juggle a full-time storyboarding gig and doing comics, because comics is a lot of work also. So I did a lot of covers. I did Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, Darkwing Duck, Chippendale Rescue Rangers, like pretty much the Disney afternoon. And it was an honor to be able to draw these characters that, you love as a kid. I never thought I would have ever been able to do something like that. And then I was lucky enough to do one issue of Darkwing Duck, the annual that came out last year. I actually took some time off of Pony to do it. I put Lesson 0 on the back burner, and then Raven took over, and I worked on this Darkwing Duck comic, and I had to spit it out in not even a month, and then jumped right back into ponies.
Well, and I have to say that I've always been jealous of your work with Darkwing Duck, because I loved that show when I was a kid.
Love that show so much.
That whole Disney afternoon, I think a lot of us veterans of the 90s are big fans of the Disney afternoon, so I think it's so cool you worked on that stuff too.
It was a dream come true for me. Like, you guys can probably only imagine. I feel the same way about those shows. So to be approached and say, hey, do you want to do this? How can you say no?
My only complaint is they're missing one important show.
Tailspin.
Absolutely.
I know.
This is the best one. I don't think Draft agrees with that one, though.
You know what? I'll just say, and let the listeners judge this for themselves, that when I was 5, 6 years old and Tailspin would come on TV, I found the opening theme music annoying, so I never watched it.
The question is, though, do you find the opening theme song annoying now?
I'm not going to answer that for safety purposes, but I will just say that I have a reaction to it.
Fair enough.
We'll leave it at that. But anyway, well, would you say that your work with the Disney afternoon cartoon style has influenced your storyboarding work with the show?
Honestly, no. It's the way it is. When I get on a show, I try to learn the style of the show as much. I mean, everyone's got their own influence, how they draw their style. I think a lot of my influence over the last 10 years have been because of Ed, and Eddie. I really learned how to really push, my cartoon skills. But I find, when you're working on, like, say, My Little Pony, for example, you kind of want to stick to the style. You want to push things because you want it to be funny, but you also know that sometimes when you push things, it doesn't always translate into flash, and it kind of gets a little bit deadened in the final product. I mean, the directors are always telling us, push your drawings further. That way, when they take them back, there's still something left. I tend to keep to the style of the show because we have to maintain the proportions more than anything when we're storyboarding. Because if we lay out a scene and we draw the pony's head too big or too small, when it goes to layout, it'll change the mood of the composition, right? If the layout artist takes your drawing and your pony isn't on model per se, it'll mess with the composition. So we try to keep them as close to, what the final product looks like in the storyboard process.
When you're storyboarding these scenes, how much liberty do you have to, say, add certain elements to a scene? The example that I'm thinking of, and maybe this wasn't part of the storyboarding process, so I'm hoping you can clarify, is the recent episode Mystery on the Friendship Express. There's a part where Twilight and Pinkie Pie keep switching their hats, and it's not something that's spoken about. It's just something that you see in the animation. And I'm wondering if that's something that you guys as storyboarders add to a scene. Or is that something that you would see written in the script somehow?
A lot of those little gags are put in by us storyboard artists. The more broader gags, like say in the last roundup where Pinkie Pie is going to the bathroom, that's obviously written into the script because she has to interact with Applejack. But little things like that, little character nuances, that is all the storyboard artists, which I love. And we're allowed to do stuff like that as long as it's not too violent, as long as we're not. Although we've gotten away with quite a few things in the show that surprised me, a lot of punching and slapping in the face, which I think is pretty funny.
Rarity, catch me. Blam!
Or the hoop in the mouth maneuver.
On Angel, I think Angel like slaps Fluttershy in the face and whatnot. I'm like, holy cow, I can't believe we did that. But I would say that most of the character nuances is all of us just putting ourselves into it. The acting, I find when I pose characters, you might notice in the show, it's kind of funny. Whenever you see one of the ponies lift their back hoof up off the ground, for some reason, that's just something that I do with them. And it's kind of like the little Sabrina thing that I put in there.
Are there any little characterizations that you've added while you've been storyboarding that, say, fans might recognize, or any kind of examples of how you guys have added to a character, whether a main character or a background character, that wasn't, say, written into the script, that comes to the top of your mind?
I think the one that most people either know about or recognize that I kind of had a part in was the whole berry punch thing. That was back in season 1. We just have a sheet of standard pony designs for background ponies to choose from. And most of the time as storyboard artists, it doesn't really matter which ones we draw. I don't even draw the cutie marks on the main 6 when I draw storyboards, let alone background ponies. Usually the layout artists pick who they want. And I think that's where the whole Lyra and Bonbon thing might be coming from. That could be the layout artists putting them in there, I think, more than usual. But going back to the berry punch, the one scene, I think it was the party for the cutie mark Crusaders thing, there was a pony that was supposed to be drinking out of a punch bowl, and I saw on the sheet of models to follow was the pony with the grapes, and I don't know what she's got, grapes and a strawberry or something. I thought that's the one I'm going to use. So I specifically, when I want a specific character drawn, I will draw the cutie mark. So when the layout artists get it, they'll use the right design. So I used her on purpose. And I think I had her burp after she drank out of the punch bowl, but I think it was cut out in the final, but the fans got it enough. And I think that's where it all stemmed from, which was pretty cool because it was kind of just a funny thing for me to add in, thinking that, maybe no one will see it or it'll get overlooked, but evidently it did not.
Leave it to the bronies to figure that one out.
Well, one thing that I've heard in the past, in past interviews with production members of the staff, is that you guys generally leave the background characters and their names to the fans. And I was wondering if in the studio, you refer to those background characters as, say, Lyra or Bonbon or Vinyl Scratch or any of those others. Because I know a lot of fans listening to this right now are curious about that.
It's true. Well, it's true for me. I actually do refer to them by the names that the fans have given them, just because it's easier for me. They've got names. Why not use them? But a lot of my other coworkers don't know who they are. And I'll be like, oh, it's the one with the harp. Oh, it's the DJ pony. But we've kind of adapted to the names that the fans have given within the studio for the most part. So yeah, for sure. I like a lot of the names, honestly.
Are there any names that you disagree with or that you would not use?
Octavia's probably the one that makes me go, that's just okay for me, but I wouldn't know what else to name her, so why not Octavia?
Are there any specific episodes that you've worked on that you're particularly fond of? Do you have any favorite episodes as well?
Okay, for ones that I've worked on, first season was a lot of Fluttershy and Cutie Mark Crusaders, so I'd have to say not so much. I'm sorry to all the Fluttershy and Cutie Mark fans. I think when you just keep getting the same characters over and over again, you get annoyed because you want to work with Twilight or Rarity or someone else and get to deal with those kind of traits because they have such strong personalities. Season 2, I'd have to say, and as much as everyone does not like this episode, Mare Duel, because for once I actually got to do something kind of action-packed, which was a challenge for me. Action scenes are not my strength, and to have an entire show that's basically a giant comic book, and she kind of looked like Darkwing Duck, which was awesome, even more awesome to me.
Yeah, that was so awesome.
I was pretty stoked on that show. So I'd have to say Mare Duel for season 2, although last roundup had a bit of action also, which I enjoyed doing.
The chase scene was good.
That was great. I think having the Mare-de-Well for practice was good that I had last round up second. And I think my favorite episodes so far, and it has not aired yet, would be the wedding episodes.
Dun, dun, dun. Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun.
And I was going to say, too, that I think that, and we mentioned this in our review of Mare-de-Well as well, that I think some fans didn't say like the writing of that episode, but everyone I've ever talked to loved the animation and the music for that episode. Like, great. Even if the writing was weak, you guys did such a fantastic job with the action sequences. It was just really cool, like that construction scene and all that. I mean, it was awesome.
Absolutely amazing.
We get what we get, right? This is a script you're given. You have to do the best you can with what you're given. And it is a show for kids. We don't pander to children, but sometimes the storylines are a little simpler than others. This one was just a Rainbow Dash episode. She's being cocky. She has to be brought down to earth again. And I just had fun with it. I had as much fun with it as I could. I think it turned out pretty all right. But the wedding episode, definitely, I know it hasn't aired yet, soon. But I think visually, musically, just all around, like we've set the bar so high with that episode. I'm so excited for it to air. I wish it was next week. I really do. I just can't wait for everyone to see it. We worked a lot of hours on that. There was 4 of us that boarded on it, and we worked our butts off. And I think it shows in the final product.
Going back to the reaction of like Mare-de-Well, and as far as the community is concerned, how do you feel about this community being so big and reacting so much to these episodes that you guys put out?
I really like it. I like hearing feedback, positive or negative. I do prefer constructive criticism, as I'm sure most of us do, rather than I just hated this episode or I really love this episode. We like to hear why you like the episode. We like to hear why you didn't like the episode. I've met a lot of amazing artists and a lot of amazing people because of the community. I don't take that for granted. And I appreciate all of the feedback I get personally. I have a lot of people messaging me on my DeviantArt, on my Twitter, and it's great to have that open communication with the fans. Sometimes it gets a little bit weird. I've had a few strange experiences here and there, but overall, I really enjoy it personally.
Coming from a background of having worked on a few popular shows to now an explosively popular show, aka Ponies, have you been really surprised by the creative outpouring that this online community has produced?
It's completely overwhelming. You can't go anywhere on the internet without seeing a pony somewhere. And I'm okay with that. It means I've got a job at the end of the day. It means we're doing a good job at the end of the day. And we're reaching out to so many more people. It's great to have such a broad audience, that can accept a show like this and really love it and really get into it and just care about it so much and feel the need to express themselves artistically. I know I've had people contact me saying they hadn't drawn for years until their show came around, and it's inspired them to pick up a pencil again. And that feels so good. That makes me want to go into work every day. So it's amazing. When I worked on other shows, I didn't get this kind of feedback. Like when I worked on the Eds, I would tell people, oh, I work on this show. No one here's ever heard about it. I was a superstar when I went to the States, and they found out that I worked on the Eds. But when I come back home, they're like, what is that? Now that I say I work on My Little Pony, everyone knows the name. Everyone knows the news show. And from the most part, what I've gathered, it's always pretty positive.
Well, it's been about a year since the Brony community started appearing online. If you can think back to 2010 when the show started airing, did you have any sense that it was going to have as large or as broad an appeal as it does?
No way. We sit in our room and we draw these ponies all day and we think, that'll probably do pretty well. I don't think any of us, Jason, Woody, all the board artists, I don't think any of us knew how crazy it would get and how fast. But I guess that all attests to a good show in the long run.
How much momentum do you think this show has, and do you feel you've hit your stride by now?
Me personally, I don't think I've hit it yet. There's so much more story left to tell. We finally have these characters figured out. There's so many places to go with them, so many ways to develop them even further, and I really look forward to that. I hope it continues on this great ride because I'm having a blast on it.
The animation style of the show seems to draw heavily from a lot of different influences, classical animation, but also anime. And there are those moments where characters react or have a big, bold statement, and you get these flare effects in the background and such. And I was wondering if that's something that the storyboarders do, or is that another part of the process? And if so, where do you guys draw that inspiration from?
A lot of that comes from Lauren originally. She designed the show. We had all of her concept drawings to learn from, and she kind of wanted an anime feel to it, but still, a bit westernized. We were allowed to be slapsticky, but we had to be careful with animation and posing because it is Flash, and there's only so much you can do in Flash. So we would use anime cheats, color card backgrounds, the zipping BG backgrounds if someone's running, which all are really effective and I think look beautiful in the show. So it's kind of a nice balance between anime and, let's say, Looney Tunes, because you have an episode like Feeling Pinky Keen, and there's so many beautiful poses and animation in that. It's probably one of my favorites for animation because it's really slapsticky. So I'd have to say overall, I think it was Lauren's overall vision as to how she wanted it. And we followed it and we tried to continue it after she left because, it's still her show.
It seems that you guys draw upon a lot of different styles, though, as well, that you bring into the show. For example, at the end of the second episode of Return of Harmony, you have a frame-by-frame, copy of the end of Star Wars A New Hope. And then you also, in the most recent episode, in the Mystery on the Friendship Express, there's a series of scenes that are done in different styles. There's the scene that was done like it was an old-time silent film. And then there's a scene that's, a kung fu film from the 70s or James Bond. Yeah, so it seems like you guys have been making a real effort to bring those influences in. Is that something that's scripted, or is that you guys?
That is us again. We just like to keep things interesting, like to change it up a little bit. That whole cutout animation that Jason and his wife did, that wasn't in the script. That wasn't planned out. He just thought, hey, this might be something really cool to try. Let's do it. And they did it on their own time and they submitted it and Hasbro loved it. And I'm glad that we're allowed to do that. We're allowed to take these little chances and kind of break away from the style of the show just, for 30 seconds here and there. Because it makes our job more fun. We get to be a little bit more inventive.
I have to admit, I made my own felt check mark.
That's awesome.
I do use it at work whenever someone does a good job. I'm like, ding.
Green check mark for you.
Speaking of people like Jason, how are these people to work with?
As directors?
Just as co-workers, really. I mean, this has got to be an amazing place where so many different people there have all these different styles, and you have these references that you say you throw in. Obviously, we've seen the Big Lebowski in there and such, so you got to have some interesting people in your office there.
Yeah, it's the collaboration which makes the entire show great. Without all these people, and sometimes people think, there's too many cooks in the kitchen, but sometimes it's not a bad thing because you get to bounce ideas off of each other and you're not afraid to throw things out there, see if it sticks. And Jason and Woody were friends first. It's kind of strange having them as a boss because I don't really see them as my boss. They're my friends. But they always want to do what's best for the show. That's the common goal with all of us. So if we can collaborate and discuss ideas, simple things like, let's make this scene a black and white noir, or make this a James Bond scene. It's great to have that, and it's great to have that positivity, and they're pretty accepting of our ideas as storyboard artists. We're not just like these lackeys that sit at a desk and just do what we're told. We're allowed to come up with stuff and reinforce our ideas are good, which is nice to have. It's a good work environment because of that.
Would you say that the Brony movement, or the increase or the unexpected increase of adult fans of the show, has encouraged you guys to include more of those kinds of references, or would you have done that either way?
I think a lot of fans think that we are putting things into the show for them. I don't think that's always the case. I think a lot of it's just coincidence. If they love it, that's amazing. If they get out of it what they want to get out of it, and there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think it completely influences us to change things and to put certain characters in or to not put a certain character in because the fans may or may not like them. We do what we do, and the fans get what they get, and it seems to be working out pretty good.
I would agree with that.
pretty awesome.
I'm just thinking like the Big Lebowski ponies. I don't think were scripted, but
if that was scripted, whoever did that was freaking amazing.
But I think the Big Lebowski ponies were designed first. I guess one of the designers was a fan. It's in the model pack that we get for each episode. You know, here's all of our characters. And there's just happens to be 3 background characters that are the Big Lebowski ponies. So the storyboard artist will find a scene or 2 to put them in, you know, just to kind of make us giggle and maybe make someone else out there giggle.
For your storyboards, when you've finished a storyboard, what does it look like? Is it just a kind of black and white sketch, or do you actually color it in yourself? Is there someone else who colors it in? You know, what does that look like when it's done with your stage of animation?
The storyboards, when done, are, for the most part, just black and white drawings, sketches. They're all done digitally. Sometimes we have to put in a bit of color for magic and some of the effects. It just helps read better if there's a color on the page, especially when you're watching it in an animatic. It stands out. But I would say it's mainly black and white.
Do you put notations on the storyboard then for where certain colors would go?
No, we would just color directly on the storyboard. We would just use a different color. We have like a note.
Yeah, good
like,
Lord, Draft, aren't you listening?
Like we have we have a notes section underneath each panel that if we need to specify something in particular, we can write it down. But we try to do everything visually. So if there's like a pink magic, you know, the scene where Twilight from the future comes and there's the big ball of energy, stuff like that is usually drawn or colored in pink so it stands out on the page. But it's not typical. It's usually black and white.
Well, as an artist who comes up with a lot of the specific details of different scenes, I wanted to know what your reaction was to some of these fan-made projects, these artworks that have been coming out, that people have made of, say, background scenery or of different elements of the show. I was wondering what you thought of that.
I think that stuff is really amazing. I've seen some pretty wonderful things I'm mainly on DeviantArt, so that's where I find all my stuff. You know, people who vector images from the show, background characters. I actually have a whole folder where I save some because I think they're great. And I love that people take the time to do them because they notice things in the show that I don't even notice. And I work on the show. And I love the people who make the toys and the statues and the maquette. It's insane because I can't do that artistically. I really admire the people who can. And I love seeing how much creativity there is out there and how talented so many bronies are, and they take so much of their time to make these wonderful pieces of art and share them. And I really like them. I don't always comment on them because I get bombarded, but I really do love seeing everything that people put out there because it's pretty overwhelming, but it's great.
Do you have any favorite artists on DeviantArt or elsewhere that you follow?
Probably one of my favorites on DeviantArt is a guy who makes the pony sculpts. His name's Chris. He'll buy the toys and he'll take out the hair and he'll mold the hair properly and make like a show accurate Rarity or a show accurate Fluttershy. I can't get over how he does it because it's brilliant. And I bug him for stuff all the time. I've got a Rarity from him. He actually made my OC for me as a gift and I was so flattered. I couldn't believe it. She is safe behind glass because she's one of a kind. And I'd probably say he's one of my favorites. I just can't get over the craftsmanship and the detail and the time he takes to make all these things and how perfect they are. And I wish that they would make toys like that in the store. But I mean, I'm glad that there's someone out there who is making them for fans. And I think he sells little kits and it's accessible to me. So if I really want one, I can say, hey, how much?
Yeah, we know this isn't a traditional animation by any means. Everything is done in Flash. But what kind of equipment do you use yourself when producing these storyboards?
Storyboard artists all work on Cintiqs. We use the big guys. And we work in a program called Sketchbook Pro. It has a nice kind of feel to it. It feels like you're actually drawing on paper with a pencil. It's better than Flash for drawing. You can get more gradients and what have you. And then once the storyboarding is done, everything else from then on in is done in Flash. All the coloring, all the posing, all the layout, all the BGs. But we primarily work in Sketchbook Pro.
And the big Cintiq.
The big ones.
Oh the monolith.
Although if we do have a song, some board artists prefer to board out their sequence or their song sequence in Flash because it's easier to see everything timed out. And once they animate it, or they don't animate it, but they kind of animate it, they pose out so much of the song, it pretty much is, key frames. Once they do that in Flash, what we'll do is we'll bring those files back into Sketchbook for the cleanup phase, and we'll clean up in Sketchbook Pro like we always do. We'll just pick key frames and tighten those up, and then those are the ones that go to the animatic.
Is there anything you would like to see created by the fandom as far as artwork, maybe even musical or animation-wise?
I think it's all pretty much been done already, don't you? I don't know. You want something done, Pony, it's pretty much done. I don't know if there's anything particular I'm waiting to see.
Just means time to be more innovative.
Geez, I don't know. I'm pretty overwhelmed with what's out there already. And I can't look at everything. I get links from people all the time. Look at this, look at this, look at this. And I try so hard to look at them all. I can't respond to everything. I watch as much as I can. And I don't know. I think for me, I'm pretty good with where it's at. There's a lot out there already. I can't think of anything that hasn't been done.
Well, so you've already mentioned that you have an OC, a one Miss Wildfire, I believe. Is that correct?
That is correct.
How did you come up with the name?
Actually, it was a combination of people on DeviantArt. I threw some names out there when I posted her online, and I tried to get the fans to name her. And I looked through, there was hundreds of comments to go through, and Wildfire just kind of stuck because I'm a bit feisty. So I figured, hey, that was the best sounding one to me, and it grew on me. So I just named her Wildfire.
Well, you've got an OC. William Anderson has an OC. Do you see other members of the production staff getting OCs in the near future?
My coworker Raven has one. You can find her.
She does.
She does. I've actually drawn her and I a few times together, but I can't post them online right now. Hopefully in the future I'll be able to. So Raven has one. I think I've drawn Jim. My friend Jim is one. But there's not too many. I think there's a few girls in layout or animation, whatever, who have done theirs, but we don't sit in the same room, so we never really get to see too many of them. I'm sure there's a handful of us that in the studio that do have them, but I kind of fell into the, how do I say this? The peer pressure of making one. Everyone else was making one, so I figured I'm going to make mine. And I noticed that a lot of people, when they make their OC, they don't make them, it's kind of like a different persona. They don't really look like them in real life. Mine I made look like me. It's got the dark circles under the eyes. It's got the gray in the hair. She's always angry. I kind of kept it to who I was. It wasn't really a stretch.
Well, so Sibsy, we all know that Twilight Sparkle is best pony, but I was wondering what your favorite pony was.
Twilight Sparkle, because she is best pony.
Indeed.
But
I disagree.
Rainbow Dash, okay. Rainbow Dash is a close second. My friends tell me I'm a bit of a combo of the both. I'm super organized, like Twilight Sparkle. I'm kind of underplaying this. I'm really organized and neat and tidy, and I gotta have my calendar, and I gotta have my notes, and I have to know when things are due, my deadlines. I'm very anal about things, but I also like Rainbow Dash because she's feisty and she sticks up for her friends, and I really like that about her. She reminds me of me a lot of the times in the show. She's not always right, but her intentions are always good.
That's a good answer. I completely agree with you.
It's a good answer. Even if I do disagree, it's a good answer.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
The thing is, One Trick, we can't all be right. We can't all be right.
But see, when I first started on the show, Rainbow Dash was my favorite pony because I could relate to her feistiness. And I remember working on Dragon Shy, where she just goes in and punches him in the face. And she was pissed off when Fluttershy was apologizing on her behalf. I kind of put in that little expression like, what are you doing? I'm not sorry I did that. That was totally me acting in that scene. And then I got to know Twilight as a character again, because this was at the very beginning of the show. I got to know Twilight better, and I said, you know what? I'm kind of like Twilight too. So I'm a bit of both.
Well, you're going to be coming up here on another show or two, aren't you?
Yeah, when I'm done ponies, I will be moving on to pound puppies for a little while, and then hopefully back to more ponies after that. Plus, if there's time, I might be dabbling in some more comic work. I can't say too much about it right now, but we'll see. It sounds like it could be a good thing related to the Disney afternoon.
Ooh.
Ooh.
So are you saying that people might want to, say, follow your Twitter and check your DeviantArt for updates on that?
If they would like to, for sure. I tend to post little tidbits of what I can when I can without saying too much. I'm always very excited about stuff, but I will get in big trouble if I open my big fat trap. So I have to be careful sometimes.
Don't get in trouble.
No, I should be all right.
I have one last question. I think that's kind of important that a lot of people are wondering as well, which is, which of the Sonic video games is your favorite?
Sonic CD, hands down. I'm not even going to argue with anybody on that. And I might add, this is the super nerd of me coming out, has to have the American soundtrack. That's it.
You've heard her, bronies.
Awesome.
Go out and play it.
It's the best.
All right. Well, Sabrina Alberghetti, a.k.a. Sibsy, is one of the senior storyboarders for My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, and it's been such a treat to have you on today.
Thanks for having me, you guys.
Well, this has been Final Draft.
And this is One Trick.
And you've been listening to Everfree Radio.